definitely, you're probably right. Well, I mean, you're going to know more about the tech than me anyway. Elizabeth, you are the founder of Cypher Coders, and you're also the co-founder of Ghostface, right?
Yep.
Before I even ask about what you do, I want to ask how you ended up in this industry. I'm so interested to hear about this.
Wow, well, that's a great question. So I guess this industry would probably be tech. And I think it started out as a young child. I've always been entrepreneurial, so I think that's kind of the basis, the foundation. But then when I went to university, I wanted to go into architecture school. So to do that, I thought, well, having a maths degree and an arts degree would be handy. So one of the first classes that I actually took as part of my maths degree was Computer Science 101. And I absolutely loved it because it was my kind of way of solving problems and thinking. So, I like maths, of course, but there's only one way to solve a problem or one prescripted way. Whereas as soon as I discovered computer science, I was like, this is exactly for me because there's not a prescribed way to solve a problem. You can get to the answer in so many different ways. So I just absolutely fell in love with it. Granted, I was also a gamer, so that helped, but that's kind of how I discovered it. And then I've sort of been kind of leading my way or just leaning towards tech ever since then.
What kind of games did you like? I'm interested because you said you're a gamer. I have to ask now.
Well, my first favorite was Mario on the old Nintendo, the one that Lego now has built out of Lego. I'm like, oh, maybe I could get that to work like the old Nintendo and be built in Lego. So that was back in the day when you had Duck Hunt with the actual like gun that plugged in and you shine it at the screen. And then I sort of moved into computer games. So I really liked Myst, which not a lot of people have heard of, but then sort of moved towards like Madden and Tony Hawk Pro Skater, all the kind of PlayStation games.
These are hardcore games. These are like gamer games. You like?
Yes, I loved it. And I think it's also what helped me to fit in with my contemporaries in computer science, where they were all boys, of course. So I was like this weirdo. But as soon as you're playing Madden together, gender just sort of goes out the window because as long as you are a good player, that's all that matters.
Because I was going to say, when you were in those classes where you won, or very like, how many girls were even on that course?
I mean, the intro course was a pretty even split, but I think that's where girls tend to fall off because you essentially get, a base student level because Computer Science 101 is a prerequisite in a lot of other degrees. So you'll get a lot of, cross-gender taking it, but then it's like the boys know more, but because they're gamers, so they actually don't know more. They've just been more exposed to it. And so I think that's where girls feel like, oh, well, clearly I'm not good at this because I don't know as much as they do. And so they wouldn't then take it forward into, a degree or as part of their career. So after that first step, I was the only girl as part of my degree program. But it was quite handy because, when I ran for president of the Computer Science Club, who was going to vote against me? So, I mean,
That's so brilliant. And then I guess that story makes complete sense as to why you found the path that you have, because let's talk about Cypher Coders first. Tell us a bit about that, because I've got a funny story to tell you, but let me tell you, you could explain first of all what that is, how that came about, and then I want to tell you a great story.
Okay, I'm looking forward to your story. Well, Cypher Coders teaches kids age 6 to 12 how to code. And we do that using creative themes, which means essentially taking things that children are actually interested in, like fashion or conservation or architecture, and applying technology and coding to that, which is kind of how coding exists in the real world. But by doing that, we get a broader range of children interested. So we have over 50% of our students are girls. But on the boys' side, you also have to then say you're getting those other boys interested, not just the techie gamer geeks, which I can say because that was me, as you know. But the other, side of boys as well, those that like sports or analytics in sports or, other STEM subjects. So we, teach kids how to code.
And how do you do that? Is that like through an app, or is it like actual classes, online class? How does it work?
Yeah, it's online classes led live with a teacher, because I think that's one of the main things that I found in my research around kids and development and that kind of thing, is that that 6 to 12 age range is such an important time to secure their understandings of the fundamentals of computer science. But also, it's a really tricky time to keep them engaged unless
Yeah.
you do it by something like gaming. So, actually, by having a really engaging live teacher on the line, it helps to, keep them engaged, but also answer their questions more readily. And it's in small group classes, so about 1 to 4 or 1 to 6, which is great because it really helps to form their collaboration skills and communication skills across with their peers. And they just love coming with their friends or making new friends in the class, which is so sweet to see as well.
That is so brilliant. You know, it's so funny. What I was going to tell you is I have a friend and we always sit down and we always exchange ideas that we're never going to actually act on. I was like, oh my God, imagine if we could do this. And she was telling me how her niece is learning how to code. I was like, and her niece, by the way, is like 6 or 7. And I was like,
Okay.
oh, okay, how is that happening? What do you mean she's learning to code? Like, I know her and she's like always in her pretty dresses and like, dancing around. Like, what do you mean she's learning to code? And she started explaining what she does and that she's doing this online class. I was like, okay, cool. Then you come across my desk and I'm looking at Cypher Coders, and I was like, by any chance, is it Cypher Coders? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm into the matter. So I was like, what a small world. But she was just saying to me like how her mum is so like, as in the mum of the niece, she's so intent on getting her to be good at tech, because she's saying she's learning so much. And honestly, like for me to have it so close to home, that's why I was so excited to speak to you, because I remember being in IT, Elizabeth, I hated it. So it wasn't computer science, it was just IT. I hated it. And also I remember back then, there used to be like door-to-door salesmen selling courses to learn how to touch type. So my
yes.
enrolled me into this course. This is back when computers were first entering the home and becoming normal. I hate it. I was like, why can't you get me to learn how to play the piano? But I used to have to do this touch typing course. So for me, I wish I had something like this, because there was no way for me and I was quite a girly girl growing up. I didn't get it. I wasn't excited by games. Like we had the duck gun game as well. Do you remember the gun game with the duck?
Yeah. Duck hunt. Yep.
Whatever. And I was just like, where's the pig gun? And I don't really know what I do. But that's just because I was super girly.
I know, that was my favorite thing about Super Mario's, was that you were going to save the princess. I'm like, why couldn't we just be the princess?
Exactly. And I love it. But that's why, honestly, I think what you're doing is so amazing, because it's not a case of we can't do it. It's just maybe like it's not appealing to you, or you don't really understand it. Because even till now, I don't really get coding. I know it's important, but it makes me so excited to hear that so many children are actually learning to code. It's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely so important. And I think that's one of the main fears that adults and parents have, is that they don't understand what coding is. But I always try to kind of remind people that even the experts in tech aren't experts in all things technology related. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
might be a database specialist, or create websites, or optimize SEO searches, or create video games. But even though you create video games, might not mean that you actually understand database infrastructure. So kind of knowing that there's a big world of tech out there, but you don't have to be an expert in it, makes it almost easier to digest little pieces as you go along, and hopefully not be as afraid.
Yeah. No, and I think you're definitely doing that, because that's what I mean. Like when I see she is like a typical girly girl, loves all the the data, but she's obsessed with it. She loves the course. So honestly, massive congrats.
Oh, great. I think the other thing is that I like to remind people when we're talking about females in tech, is that computer science was invented by a female, and it's a very female way of thinking. Because think about when you have a million things on your plate and you have to figure out how to do everything before you can get out of the house in the morning.
Yeah.
It's like multitasking, right? But you don't always have to do it in the same order. So the female brain is very good at breaking problems down in different ways and solving it, with a lot of lateral thinking. And that's not to say that, men aren't great at problem solving as well. It's just they approached in a different way. but computer science really lends itself to the way that our brains work. So we just need to get girls excited about it. And then they'll be like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that, because it's not, advanced calculus, and it's very specific way of like, okay, my brain doesn't really understand that. It's anyone can solve these problems, especially females and girls. So
I love that. I love that. And let's talk about Ghost Space.
great. Yeah, so I co-founded GoSpace AI, which is a dynamic resource allocation. Sounds a little bit complicated, but it's in the real estate industry, and it's essentially optimizing when people come into the office. So you can imagine before COVID, that not really being a thing unless you're a big corporate real estate trying to reduce or optimize where people are in buildings.
Yeah.
But after COVID, it's really exciting, because think about the future of work and people that want to only come in for 2 days a week or 3 days a week. They also, if they're coming into the office, they don't want to just go into the office and sit on a Zoom call, right? They need to be with their teams or with the people that they're collaborating with. So this AI engine that I wrote with my co-founder and is patented and really exciting. And again, it's that female way of thinking of bringing different algorithms together. Is used to optimize that and to automate it, so that that when you're going into the office, you'll be with the people that you want to collaborate with and work with. So think of it as like a mashup of, like, I don't know, Facebook with your groups or something, but in the real world, or you don't have to book a space. So it's slightly boring if you're not in corporate real estate, but if you are in real estate, it's very
Anything that increases efficiency, though, is something that people are going to love, right?
That's exactly. I'm all about automating.
I love that. And what inspired you to start this? Because did you work for a specific firm before and then decide to go solo? Like, how did the transition happen?
Yeah, so I was working in the architecture industry as a consultant here in London. And my co-founder was as well. And he was designing B Sky B's campus, which is a big corporate real estate news agency.
Yeah.
So you could imagine a lot of the kind of corporate planning efficiencies working out in the design process. So I was also working on other big corporate projects in architecture. And we saw this problem come about of, there's the design time, which of course is what we went to school for and is architecture and is super exciting. But what actually happens after the building is done and people are coming in and the teams are all changing, and people get posted and they're like, okay, maybe I'll move the marketing team over here and I'll put this team over there. I mean, it gets really complicated really quickly, and it just keeps going if you think about the lifetime of a building. So that's kind of why we thought, actually, we could solve this problem, because we're seeing it from the architecture side, and the planners are seeing it from or the HR and the facilities managers are seeing it from the other side. So we were kind of in this perfect storm where we saw this problem and this huge waste as well. Buildings create so many CO2 emissions that actually, if we could reduce or optimize their space, we can also save the planet along the way. So that was kind of the premise behind it. And then we just put our heads together and started coding. I was about 8.5 months pregnant with my daughter Ocean. So we always like to tell her that she has a twin that's the AI. Her name's the GoSpace AI's name is Adra. So Adra and Ocean are twins. One's just an AI and the other one's a human. So
oh, that's so amazing. You're like Superwoman, honestly. Like, for me, the tech industry actually scares me. Like, when I see an update coming on iOS, I start crying because I'm like, what are they going to change now? I was like, I'm just going to use everything. So that is honestly so brilliant. And I want to ask you, for someone who doesn't really know much about coding, what is the benefit of learning how to code? Because that's one that obviously coding sciences that you do with young people. Why is it so important that they learn, and what are the benefits?
Well, if you think about the future, it's all revolves around technology. So at Cypher, we always say we're not trying to create a world of little computer scientists. There's going to be those specialist computer programmers or algorithm people or coders out there. But actually, the base level of understanding technology and coding is necessary to be future ready, to actually interact with technology in the future. So the importance, there's some key skills that you get by learning how to code, like problem solving, collaboration when you're working with other coders or other students as well, and creativity. So again, going back to the kind of foundations of computer sciences, there's no one way to solve this problem. So it's about taking technology and understanding just enough to know that, okay, I can meddle around a bit and I'm not going to break it. Or, um, I can create my own website. If I have an idea for a business, I can just go on this, or I can go on Google. I always like to say the best coders, the best programmers are actually just the best Googlers because they can. There's that image that we all have in our head of a coder like sitting in a black room with all the green text, like the matrix coming down the screen and just like typing out the code. That's not how it works in the real world. It's about like finding different pieces and putting them together and being able to just read that piece of code and change it for what you want it to do. So it's not like writing a novel from scratch. And even think about when you write a novel, you're going to take influences from reading other stories and things like that and bring it all together. You're going to write an overview or sort of a synopsis of how you want to write it. That's the same thing that programming is. It's just using other bits of pieces from technology and from the outside world, from Google.
You make it sound less scary. You make it sound like it's doable. And I love that.
It's totally doable. Exactly.
So obviously you're in the tech space. You must love tech. What is one piece of tech that you could not live without?
Ooh, that's tricky. I mean, I would say my phone, although, because I love the iPhone. I think I remember when the iPhone came out and I actually just had, I don't know if you remember these, but the iPod Touch.
Of course I remember. I had one.
And I used to go around and pretend like it was the iPhone. Yes, it was just. And then when they first came out with the iPad, because the resolution wasn't any better than the iPhone, my husband and I used to be like, well, that's just an iPhone for blind people because it didn't have it's bigger. The resolution wasn't any better. But I have to say that as a piece of technology, and it's really essential for my life. And I think it's also, as a mother, knowing that I can also put it in front of my children as and when needed for a bit of hopefully educational babysitting. It's super important.
You made me laugh there when you said, I don't know if you remember an iPod, because I don't know if you've seen this TikTok, Elizabeth. Do you remember the iPod Shuffles, one that had no screen at all?
Yes, I have that. Yeah.
So this like Gen Z, I think she must be like, I don't know, 18, 19. She found her parents' old iPod Shuffle and she's like, put it in her hair as a hair clip, and it went viral on TikTok. She's like, it's like vintage. And I was like, you've got an iPod Shuffle in your hair. It's not a clip. So you really made me laugh there because technology's gone crazy. Like, I think of my first phone. It was like a slide little Nokia Pebble thing. There was like no internet, no nothing. And now I'm totally with you. I don't think I could live without my iPhone. It knows my life more than I know it. I don't know my plans if it's not for my phone.
I know. I hear you.
That's crazy. And another thing I wanted to ask you, because what you explained, it just felt very linear and you seem really like passionate, really optimistic. Have there been struggles, in creating both of your companies, or what have been the main challenges?
Yeah, I think part of something that, again, my husband and I laugh about is that people say everyone in the future is going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I think that the future is lending itself towards more entrepreneurial thinking or, managing your own career. So potentially like working in different businesses as a consultant. But being an entrepreneur and actually being, having the weight of other people's livelihoods on your shoulders is actually really stressful. And so it's comes with its challenges, but actually that's what I love about it is that I'm motivated because I know that I'm not only making an impact in the lives that we're touching with Cypher or with Ghostface, teaching kids and things like that, but actually for the people that I work with and that I can actually help build this foundation that supports them and their careers and their futures. And so the struggles are definitely there. It's something that it's very difficult to articulate, but I'm sure lots of other, founders have. But I think you brought up optimism, and I think that that's probably my strongest suit is just eternal optimism. It's like we have this glass of water, and in the morning it's completely full of optimism, and little by little throughout the day it just gets like drinks taken out of it, and some days you'll end up with like half your optimism glass full, which is great, but most days it's pretty much empty. So by the end of the day we're like, okay, so are you putting the kids to bed, or is it my turn? Like, you go to bed by yourselves.
Yeah.
And then we, go to sleep and wake up recharged with that, hopefully that glass full of optimism. But
Yeah.
it's a struggle. Some days are worse.
Maybe that can be your next idea, creating some sort of AI that helps children go to sleep.
Absolutely.
If that would be possible. You need a robot or something, right?
We do have Alexa, which I'm pretty sure my 3-year-old, all I have to do is turn on Let It Go, and it only takes about 2 times and she's out. So, we're halfway there. My older ones are not as easy, but it's like the sounds sink in and she's like, okay, now it's time to switch off my brain. But, there's something to it.
I love that. I feel like Let It Go is such a pumpy song though. I can't imagine falling
I know.
asleep.
She wants to listen to it. I know. It's her bedtime song. I'm like, what?
That is honestly so brilliant. And I wanted to ask you something about the mission, because is Coders Cypher like exclusively for young girls, or is it for everyone?
It's for everyone. So I think that was one of the things that I considered when founding Cypher. And you'll notice by how it's spelled, CYPHER. It has her as a subliminal message in the title.
Nice.
But I also have a 12-year-old son. And I actually thought about my career in tech, and even when creating GoSpace. And it wasn't that the female way of thinking was better. It was actually the collaboration between the way that men think and the way that females think that actually makes a better product in the long run. And in the real world, this is how we're going to be interacting with each other, right? There's boys and girls, and especially in that 6 to 12 age range, I think there's certain things and there's certain ways of thinking that, for example, the brain of an 8-year-old girl loves storytelling and can like think about the characters and can go more in depth to what they're creating, whereas potentially the brain of an 8-year-old boy might bring in that competitive track, and they're really pushing forward, bringing in the competitive nature. If you bring those two together, then they actually benefit from each other. So right from the onset, I thought this really needs to be an inclusive environment that promotes, ways of thinking and ideas and themes that girls will be drawn in by. But actually then it's about working together, boys and girls, and calling on the strengths that the girls bring just as much as the strengths that the boys bring, because I think that's where we start to have fall off of females in STEM and females in technology, when they don't think that they're as good as the boys. Think about that first computer science class that I was in university. We actually just empower them to say, actually, what you're bringing to the table is just as valuable as what the other side is. So that was a long-winded answer to say that it's important that we have both genders working together.
And in creating that, you are encouraging more girls, because I know that the gender diversity anyway in tech isn't. We already explained your second class once everyone dropped off and you were the only girl. So I think what you're doing and like trying to amplify both voices is amazing, because naturally the girls are going to feel more welcome. There's going to feel like there's a space for them. Because I always think, when my mum and dad tried to get me into touch typing was the start, and they were like, Deana, let's teach you something. I was like, leave me alone. I don't want it, because I just didn't get it. But now I just think it's so important. And how many people talk about wanting to be able to develop an app? How amazing would it be if you just knew how to do that? So honestly, like, massive congratulations on all the success you've had so far, and it's so exciting. I know people that are using it, so it's awesome.
That's really exciting to hear.
And my last question, I guess, because it's something I love to ask all participants. Authenticity is so important. How important is it to you, and how do you think you remain authentic in such a crazy industry?
I think you're right. I think one of the ways that I find it easy to be authentic is being a mother. And so I think authenticity comes down to owning the person that you are. And oftentimes, what I see is that people keep their work life and their home life quite separate, or they'll do one and then the other. But actually, I've always approached it that if I can be authentic in both my work life and my home life and join those two things together, that I'll be able to set a better example for my children and potentially for those that work with me at Cypher as well. So I think for me, being authentic is owning who you are on screen and off screen, or in work and at home, and being confident enough to bring those things together and put it forward to the world, really.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And if anyone's watching this and want to like find Cypher Coders or find out how to get in touch, what can they do, or what should they look for?
Yep, just go to cyphercoders.com, or if you want to email, it's just hi@cyphercoders.com as well.
It is like, thank you so much. Honestly, like you've taught me that women were leading computer science, which I never knew about. I never knew that. So I love that. And honestly, I really appreciate giving up your time. I've had such a nice time speaking with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.